Hello and welcome to today's Q&A. I'm Henrietta Brealey. I'm the Chief Executive of the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce, and I'm joined by Andrew Penlington from Chamber Patrons IT. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, Henrietta.
Now, Andrew, I wondered if you wanted to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm a director for Air IT and run the Birmingham office. I've been doing that for 20 years plus now. And we're basically an MSP, a managed IT services provider that provides IT help and support to small and medium-sized enterprises in the Greater Birmingham region.
Something which has always been important, but of course got all the more topical and all the more critical over the last 15 months or so. With that in mind, has the pandemic made things like IT security even more important? Are you seeing even more increased threats at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a real call to arms for us back in March 2020 with customers, having to change the way they were working, operate a remote workforce where traditionally they'd been used to and experienced to having people office-based. And that absolutely has raised IT security issues. Obviously, when we were all office-based, we were behind the security controls that the organisation would put in place, such as a firewall and other things. And we also had our colleagues to talk and share concerns with. But now being remote, our staff are using Sky, BT, TalkTalk connections, probably have a wireless network with the default settings. The admin password probably hasn't been changed. And at Air IT, we run something called an in-house security operations centre. So for some of our clients, we continually monitor their network and systems for unusual activity, signs of accounts being compromised, that kind of thing. And we've seen a massive spike in the number and the type of attacks being conducted. Just very quickly, a recent survey performed by Deloitte highlighted that prior to the pandemic, approximately 20% of attacks were using unknown and unseen before methods to attack systems. Since the pandemic, that's increased to 35%, which makes it very difficult. If we haven't seen the threat before, well, how do we combat it? So it is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We hear a lot about how operating in a pandemic has catalysed a lot of innovation for businesses, lots of new and creative ways of doing things. I think it's probably fair to say it's the same has been seen with scammers, even on a personal level. I know some of the personal scam messages you get of, you've got a parcel being delivered, you need to pay the remaining delivery fee, or I had one the other day saying they needed my account details to transfer me a Bitcoin. Things have become a little bit more adapted and more innovative in this time, haven't they? With that in mind, what do you think employers should be doing to really make sure that they're keeping their information secure and their systems secure during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Attacks are coming from all angles. Just before coming on this video with yourself today, Henrietta, I had a phone call from the National Cybersecurity Agency telling me that my NI, national insurance details have been compromised. It's a recorded message. You just wouldn't be contacted in that way. And so it is really, you have to keep your wits about you. And I think there are 5 things really that employers should fundamentally be doing to help protect their staff, their business, and their livelihoods. The first and foremost is multi-factor authentication, 2-step verification. Passwords alone are not enough. And multi-factor authentication is basically about using multiple pieces of information to help secure an account. So, for example, something that such as a password, a username, something that you possess, so a token, a mobile phone, and also we're also seeing an increase in biometrics, the use of biometrics, so fingerprints, eye recognition, face recognition, that kind of stuff to secure our accounts. You may have seen in the news the Colonial recent attack over in the US, and it seems to be that attack, a massive organization. It seems to be that the source of that attack was due to a password being compromised, using the same password for multiple services. Multi-factor authentication wasn't used. So the VPN account was exploited, and ultimately Colonial paid the attackers £3.5 million to get their data back. And this happens not just for the big, obviously it makes the news when it's big, massive organizations, but it's happening every day from the smaller organizations who are most affected. So number one, multi-factor authentication, turn it on. It's often part of the service that we're all using, Microsoft 365, Facebook, WhatsApp. It's available, just needs turning on and activating it. Number two is, again, kind of following on from the Colonial example, is use unique and discrete passwords for all the services that we have. I know that's easier said than done. You know, if you think of all the accounts that we use today, to remember and assign a unique password that's 8 characters or more long is a real challenge. But that's where there are tools out there, some of which are free, like password managers that will really help you to, you know, you can secure your password manager account using multi-factor authentication. So you know that that's secure. So that's the only thing that you need to remember and know. And then the password manager will take all the hard work out of it for you. And you can set super complex, super unique details for every account. Because if we're using the same password for multiple accounts, then if that password is compromised, then the cyber criminal has got access to more information than if we were using discrete passwords. So that's obviously an issue, and it's easily addressed too. Mm-hmm. Number three, I think, is regularly update and patch your systems. All software applications that we use have vulnerabilities in them, and the software vendors like Microsoft, Apple release patches and fixes to address those issues during the life cycle of a product. So, you know, they're doing it, yes, for additional functionality and so on, but it's also about security vulnerabilities and holes in the system that need to be addressed to better protect us. And the thing is when they issue a fix, they basically disclose the details of what the problem was. And why the fix has been released. So they're effectively announcing, you know, or informing the cyber criminal that there's an issue here that can be exploited. So when we get on our iPhone or our PC that message that says your laptop needs to update, please don't ignore it. Install that update as soon as you possibly can. And ideally, you know, much of this software will do it automatically, but you can't have complete faith in that. Ideally, you should have some kind of solution that centrally manages and controls updates to all your machines and users, relying on you know, Joe Bloggs in the accounts department to make sure that they've accepted that update is probably not good enough. And that's where an MSP like Air IT or another will have systems in place that will automate that process for you. I think number four is really, and again, not enough businesses, from my experience, heed this advice, particularly with a pandemic and remote working. We now have less, or we're allowing more devices than ever before to connect to corporate systems. And unless we've got controls in place to limit access that devices can have, then it's an issue. If we've lost control of devices, we've probably lost control of the data as well. So keeping an inventory of the devices that your users have and are allowed to access company data with is a great idea. And again, a lot of the tools that we use today, such as Microsoft 365, include components as a core part of the package that allow you to manage this, such as conditional access, mobile device management, application management. So you know that you know, your son or daughter's laptop can't access the company email, or, you know, dad or mum has forgot to log out of the account and this kind of stuff. So it's really important. And then my fifth, there's lots of recommendations, but I'm trying to think of, you know, I'm putting forward some things that are achievable for us all to do. And my fifth and final recommendation is you should simulate cyber attacks. You should conduct pen tests and simulated and campaigns on your system to understand where your weaknesses lie. You can't put your head in the sand because you know, like I said, seriously, small companies are a bigger target than big companies because they're easier to get into. If a burglar was going down a street and there was a front door open versus a front door that was locked, they're going to try the front door that's open, aren't they, first? And that the same applies to our IT systems. Performing penetration tests is effectively using the techniques and methods that criminals will use to access your systems, so you can identify those weaknesses ahead of an event and take action to secure them. And definitely if you take card payments, or if you have to comply with PCI DSS and ISO 27001 certified, then you should be doing pen tests at least once a year, and certainly anytime there's an important change to your systems. There's more to that. There's lots that we can do. I appreciate that you can, when it comes to IT, you can spend tens of thousands of pounds, but these are takeaways that are low cost and easy to implement and make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Like you say, make sure that those doors and windows are closed and you've not got a big welcome on in sign on your systems. So multi-factor authentication, unique passwords, update and patch and make sure it's actually happening. Control the devices that can connect to your systems and simulate those attacks, that pen testing. That all sounds relatively straightforward. However, obviously we know it's not happening universally. What common mistakes do you see when it comes to businesses looking at how they secure their systems? Where are the common areas where people fall down, the sort of pitfalls in that space?
Yeah, Henrietta, I think of those 5 recommendations, the biggest challenge is probably the pen testing. That's probably the most costly, probably the most rewarding, but probably the most costly thing to do. I think really things like multi-factor authentication and discrete passwords, we all know that we should be doing this, but convenience and our daily working lives get in the way. So I think it's really a case of awareness and diligence. That's the key issue. They're not difficult things to turn on and set up. Yet again, surveys done by government organizations and cybersecurity vendors highlight that less than 50% of us are using multi-factor authentication. The most common password today is password. And that's been the same. That's been the case every year since 2013. Which is madness, isn't it?
I've got to say, one of the scariest things I've ever done was get shown one of those websites where you type in your email address and it shows you all of the data breaches that have taken place associated with that email address, and you realise how frequently this happens and how many of your passwords could be out there on the internet. It is so important to do, isn't it?
It is big.
Unique passwords.
100%. And sorry, Henrietta, but absolutely, because you're relying often on other providers to ensure that they've put the security measures in place, and reputable companies with massive budgets do get breached, and that then can have a knock-on effect to you. LinkedIn have had a breach many years ago. MyFitnessPal was an app that was breached, and this is outside of your control, but the control that you do have is the unique and discrete passwords.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, people not turning on two-factor authentication. Do you think some of that's just limited awareness about what software, what programs, what platforms can do? Because I know, there's probably a lot of people that during the pandemic have, say, got Microsoft Teams licenses, we've invested in new software and new operating systems, etc., but perhaps might not be fully aware of everything they can accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of these things are tucked away in a setting somewhere. And this is where, whether you've got in-house IT capability or you can work with a provider such as Air IT or your incumbent, like any relationship, you need to have trust and the ability, I think, to pick up the phone or ping an email over to them just to say, I'm just a bit concerned about this, or I've heard about accounts being compromised. What can I do to protect myself? So I think it's just getting it on your radar and then looking for advice and help to support you. And we're always there for that, of course, as well.
Fantastic. I mean, on that note, Andrew, this has been incredibly informative today, but are there any final messages you'd want to share or anywhere that you'd recommend those viewing this go to find out more?
Yeah, sure. I think a great source of help and support is the National Cyber Security Centre, which is ncsc.gov.uk. Their mantra is to make the UK the safest place to live and work online. And they've also got again, if you just Google cyber aware and go to the NCSC website with the cyber aware extension on the URL, they've got lots of helpful advice, whether it's families, businesses, large enterprises, that will advise you on things to look out for and things to implement. Also, the government Cyber Essentials scheme. I know we're doing a webinar on this to Greater Birmingham patron members in a week or so's time. But the Cyber Essentials, if you follow the guidelines there, you will be a much safer business and protect your staff and customers far better. And then, of course, the Air IT are out here, to support all the businesses in Birmingham and beyond. You can visit our website at air-it.co.uk, connect with us on LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm Andrew Penlington. You can find me again on LinkedIn, and there's always stuff that we're putting on there that's about best practice and helpful advice on how to make you more secure and productive in these times.
Fantastic. Well, that's been really informative, Andrew. I've certainly learnt a thing or two, as well as some of those very straightforward tips for what to focus on, particularly for small businesses, to make sure you've got that security in place. Please do check out the resources available from Air IT, the National Security Centre, Cyber Security Centre, and more that Andrew's mentioned on that upcoming webinar. And we look forward to viewers joining us for future Q&As, webinars, podcasts, and other sessions that we'll be running over the coming weeks and months. Thank you again, Andrew. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thanks, Henrietta.